is if you can shut up for 5 minutes. You have to survive first. More importantly, you have to impress me. That is the harder task. Dante, give the order of battle. Dante's eyes widened in surprise. Sergeant? Yes, Dante. I want you to present a plan of attack. You do realize that part of my role is to assess what function you might fill in our chapter when your training is complete. I'm testing my opinion of you right now. I suggest you hurry, or you'll find yourself guarding munitions trains for the next 100 years. Dante cleared his throat. Ristan smirked at him when Galileon wasn't looking. Lorenz nodded encouragingly. Orc outriders are inbound. We've been ordered to regroup with Captain Rodrigo and the Iron Helms, but we're going to have to fight our way through. Mount up, suggested Dante. Galileon looked at him incredulously. Sergeant, said Dante, that is an edification. You will never be more than a line warrior with powers of leadership like that. I'm not often mistaken, but it looks like I've misjudged you. Dante flushed red. I'm sorry, it's my first one. Galileon shut his eyes and pressed his fingers to his temples. By the powers of foresight my gene bond with our sire Sanguinius grants me, I predict you will— he screwed up his face— be a woeful officer, neophyte. Pitiful. The scouts laughed. Well, I don't know what I'm supposed to say, snapped Dante, now deeply embarrassed. He could deliver plans, he had done so before, but Galileon made him bashful, so anxious of making a mistake he could do nothing but. Orc speed cultists usually attack en masse, screens of bikes in front of light transports. Their weaponry is heavier than ours. Attacking them front-on would be counterproductive. We should divide ourselves into a number of groups, maybe 3, try to split them up. If we stationed a small squad in the pumping tower with sniper rifles and set a field of cluster mines about the base, we could cut them apart before they can reorganize themselves. We'd avoid fighting them all at once, where they're strongest, and— Dante slowed down. Galileon was watching him carefully. And, said the sergeant, we can scatter them and ride through. We can't kill them all. Galileon nodded and pointed at Dante. Now that, young warriors, is a proper plan. Get to it. Brother Sergeant Ariel, if you'd be so good as to assign groups. Ariel nodded and waved his scouts to him. Be confident, young blood, said Galileon. You are a space marine, the chosen of the Emperor of Terror. Feel it when you speak. He slapped Dante hard on his pauldron. Now, ready yourself for combat. Lorenz scanned the horizon, intent on the blur where Rora's grey deserts met its blank sky. He is in love with those magnoculars, I think, said Ristan sotto voce. The others in the squad laughed. Shut up, scout, growled Galileon. Let him perform his task. The Emperor has a use for good eyes, and none for a jester. The scouts laughed harder for that. They're coming, said Lorenz. Dust plumes on the horizon. Numbers, boy, said Galileon gruffly. Always give as much information as you can. Information can mean the difference between victory and death. 100, maybe? Not a lot, but not a little. Now he sounds like an orc. I'll not say shut up again, neophyte Ristan, said Galileon. Next time I shall shut you up. You will find it hard to exercise your wit with a broken jaw. Sorry, Sergeant. Well then, asked Galileon of Dante. Stop looking so surprised. It is your plan. Dante nodded and activated the vox set attached to his ear. Diversion Group 2, are you ready? Affirmative, voxed their leader, a scout called Giacomus from Baal Primus. Dante and he had been in different training cohorts, and he was only just beginning to get to know him. Sergeant Ariel. We can see them, Scout Dante, said Ariel. Lorenz guesses right. We count 72 attack bikes and 20 orc warriors in 3 transports. As part of the equipment they had to monitor, the scouts, Galileon and Ariel, had complete control over the neophytes' vox sets. They could hear everything the younger space marines said at all times if they wished. What are your orders? Dante hesitated. They'd all run command and control exercises, but he had never been given command in a combat situation. Maintain silence until they close? Open fire at medium range to make sure of high kill ratio. As soon as they see you, they'll come for you. We need to split them up. Get them angry so they won't notice they're dying, Sergeant." Galileon crossed his arms and shrugged. "That is not my problem to solve." "You are the one giving the orders this afternoon, Scout," boxed Ariel. "But you know, if they were bad, Brother Galileon or I would let you know. A word of advice. Stop phrasing commands as questions. The Blood Angels do not operate as a committee. Ariel, out." Galileon sat across his bike, his arms crossed, staring at Dante. "Sergeant?" Galileon goggled his eyes at Dante. "Neophyte?" He mimicked Dante's voice. "So, do you think we have all day here?" "No, Sergeant," said Dante. "Let's ride up the ridge, close formation. Ravane, keep on the inside of the formation. Stand ready to fire your grenade launcher when I order." "Yes, Dante." "Let us keep it slow. Lure them in. We should split them closer to the tower than further out." "Why?" challenged Galileon. "Greater concentration will provide a more target-rich environment for our snipers, Sergeant, and they're more likely to ride straight onto the mines." Galileon nodded approvingly. "It sounds like you've learnt something after all. Well then, what are you waiting for? You heard him, Scouts. Move out." Engines coughed into life and roared out white exhaust. Dante led the way towards the approaching dust cloud, feeling proud yet nervous to be put at the head of the group. The bikes fanned out around him, Ravane and his heavier weapon protected by the rest. Galileon rode beside him, scrutinizing his every move. "Make some dust of our own. Get their attention and bring them in." Dante glanced to the far side of the pumping station. 400 yards away, their brothers rode out away from them. Skidding his bike purposefully from side to side, Dante sent up a cloud of dust. His comrades copied him, and soon a column of it was lifting skywards. "You have their attention," boxed Ariel. "Half have broken off. They're coming towards your position. Everyone, forward half a mile, double back. Goad them into the chase. Group 2, prepare your envelopment." The other group of scout bikers accelerated obliquely towards the Orc outriders. The Orcs saw them late, making them peel further away from the main line of the Orc reconnaissance group's advance. Dante's group moved forwards, approaching the wall of ash and oily smoke thrown up by the Orcs' half-tracked bikes. Dante got a fleeting glimpse of silhouettes in the smoke. Huge, brutish creatures, hunkered over the handlebars of crude machines. "Fire!" he ordered. Bolt guns mounted on the bike fairings chattered, sending streams of bolt rounds at the foe. The magnesium line of tracer rounds flared bright in the choking air. Orcs exploded. Bikes detonated. The Orcs fired back, but their weapons, though powerful, were shorter ranged than the Space Marines' bolt guns. Overpowered for their bike's small mass, the Orc guns sent their vehicles slewing about, and their rounds went whining past. The battlefield was a roaring confusion of engine noise and airborne particles. Dante stole glances left and right. His squad mates maintained perfect formation. Then the Orcs drew near, and their guns came into effective range. Despite the unbalancing effect of the guns on the bikes, and the Orcs' natural inclination to fire without aiming, the sheer number of bullets the Xenos weapons put out meant some were bound to hit. Heavy slugs smacked off Dante's bike's bulletproof tires and rang off the shield. His comrades ducked low, using their bike's considerable armour to shelter behind. Fairist spat a guttural nomad's oath as a round nicked his shoulder, but none of the scouts fell. The bikes roared past one another like feral world warriors jousting on horseback. Dante ducked a swing from a madly grinning Orc, its long tongue lolling from its mouth. "Spread!" ordered Dante. The combat bikes opened up their formation. Heavier Orc vehicles were coming towards the scouts, a pair of heavily armed half-tracks flanking a stripped-down transport crammed with whooping greenskins. Ravane's grenade launcher huffed twice, blasting a crater in the dust. The second smashed straight into the half-track, reducing its driver to paste and blasting off its front wheel. The contraption snagged on the wreck of its front portion and flipped, becoming a tumbling ball of scrap and fire. Bolt rounds punched Orcs from their handrails on the transport. "About!" ordered Dante. In unison, the bikers braked, slamming their left feet down, and turned sharply about, back towards the pumping station. They accelerated, gunning down the orcs that had charged past them from behind, killing a dozen and causing them to scatter. Dante's squad rushed through. "That should have made them sufficiently annoyed," boxed Galileon. "To the tower, round and back," boxed Dante. They sped towards the pumping station, now a dark shape behind wreaths of sand and ash. Orcs fired indiscriminately at them. Air cracked over Dante's head, just audible through the rumble of engines and guns. Ariel's men had opened fire. Dante risked a look back. Orcs were tumbling from their machines, neat holes punched in their manic faces. The pump station came close. "Single file," he ordered. The bikes closed up, rushing one after the other along a narrow, predefined path back to the station. The orcs maintained a wide formation, gaining as the scout bikers decelerated to fall into single file. The ground bucked as the orcs rode over the cluster mines the scouts had planted around the tower. Dante's squad jinked and wove through the minefield, the neophytes relying on their superlative memories to guide them through safely. The orcs had no such chance. The brighter of them tried to follow the path described by the scout bikes, but most ended in fiery ruin. The scouts roared past the station's buried reservoir tanks and arced around the back. Giacomus's bike group arrived a moment later. The scout units crossed paths, blasting apart the few pursuing orcs who had made it through the minefield. Lorenz whooped with laughter. Dante smiled. The plan, his plan, had worked. They emerged around the front to find the ash dunes dotted with smoking bikes and dead orcs. The survivors were retreating at speed, falling from their saddles as Ariel's snipers calmly picked them off. Dante slowed and stopped, scanning the area for threats. Galileon rode up beside him. "Ariel, get your scouts down and mounted. We're moving on the front," bellowed Galileon. The scouts in the tower broke down their sniper rifles quickly and rappelled to the desert floor. Moments later, the first of them came roaring out of the pumping station on their bikes, joining Galileon's squad. Galileon waited for both units to assemble, then nodded at Dante. "Not bad, Dante," he signed with one hand. "Not bad at all." The roar of battle reached the scouts long before they crested the rise overlooking the plain, the thunderous reports of whirlwind rockets, the buzz-saw rattle of Baal-patterned Predator's guns, the rippling, popping bang of exploding mass-reactive shells, intermingled with the gruff chatter of orc stubbers and the weird singing of their energy weapons. A flight of storm talons rushed over the scout bikes, tipping their wings in salute. They disappeared over the brow of a hill, which the scouts summited shortly afterwards. Galileon brought them to a halt at the top, Ariel pulling up beside him. He shut off his engine, and the scouts followed suit. A long, shallow declivity swept down to a plain of baked mud, so similar to parts of Baal Secundus that Dante could almost believe they were home. In the far distance, the hollowed-out bulk of Rora's hive Quintus smoked. It was devoid of life now, and had been burning for 3 years. The air smelt of burned oil and blood. Dante's eye-teeth twitched in his gums at the scent, and he had to swallow away a flood of saliva. Tanks billowing oily smoke dotted the hillside. The corpses of orcs lay thick in clusters where smaller parts of the greater battle had been fought and decided, their apish limbs entangled. The fight had started on the hill before moving to the plain. A wedge of blood angels were driving deep into a sea of orcs. The gunships unleashed streaking missiles at an orc heavy tank, destroying it in a spectacular mushroom of fire. Galileon made a disapproving noise in his throat. "The position does not look good," said Dante. "It is not. You witness the effects of the rage of our Lord, the greatest of angels. Look upon it. Ask yourselves, my scouts, are you ready to control such fury and bend it to your will?" "They are in the grip of the thirst?" said Dante. Galileon nodded. "Our brothers are outnumbered and close to being overwhelmed. They have felt the thirst call, and have answered." "They may lose because of it," said Lawrence. "It may seem so," said Galileon, "but at times such as these the thirst can be our greatest weapon. They shall prevail." He pulled up his breathing mask and spat gritty saliva into the dust. "Surely it will not be enough," said Dante. "They will be slaughtered." The line of red was very thin, and the orcs near numberless. "Have faith, young one," said Ariel, "for wonders grace the sky." The younger sergeant pointed to a golden figure streaking through the heavens. The figure wore a jump-pack fashioned in the shape of spread white wings, a sword held out in front of it that glittered with the blue fire of a disruption field. It dropped like a hawk into a mass of orcs. The scouts held their breath, for the aliens piled onto it in their multitudes. A second later, the figure exploded out of the melee, leaving a crowd of dead orcs behind. Dante gasped and leaned forwards, squinting. At that distance, his enhanced vision gave him but the fleetest glimpse of the warrior's mask. But he knew it. "Who is that warrior? I did not know any of the guard had come with us," said Ristan. "Not joking now, Ristan," said Galileon. "That is no ordinary brother. That is the Sanguinor, the herald of Sanguinius, the true angel. It appears when the sons of the great angel are sore beset, coming from nowhere, departing as mysteriously. The situation is dire indeed if we witness its presence." "The Sanguinor's real?" said the scout, Lethael. "I thought it was a metaphor. Sanguinius looking over us from beyond the grave." Galileon would ordinarily greet such an utterance with a blistering remark, but he stared out over the battlefield, watching the Lord of the Hosts do its bloody work. "No, scout, it is real enough. You will find there is a lot that is strange and terrible in this universe. The Sanguinor is one of those things. Be glad it's on our side." Galileon turned his engine on. "Our brothers need our help as much as they need the Sanguinor. We're going into the thick of battle. Follow me. Do exactly what I say, and you will make it out alive today. Hit and run, short bursts, strafe the edge of the foe. Draw some of it off if we can, but do not engage in melee, no matter how strongly Sanguinius's blood calls for you to fight close. You will slay many of them in your fury, but you will be swamped and cut down. This light armour is not good for protracted hand-to-hand combat against the likes of orcs." The scouts readied themselves for the ride onto the plain, but Dante stayed rooted to the spot, watching the flashing of gold as the Sanguinor swooped low to strike at the orcs. "Dante, do not let success go to your head. Move out." "Sergeant, I have seen it before," he said, pitching his voice so that the sergeant alone could hear him. "What?" "The Sanguinor. I've seen it before." "I do not recall reports of a manifestation from any of your engagements." "What's this, your 23rd? Dante nodded. "It does not show up just like that, Scout," he said, snapping his fingers. "This is a great wonder you bear witness to, not a commonplace happenstance." "No, Sergeant, before. I mean I saw it before I was chosen. On Baal Secundus. I was dying of lack of water." He couldn't bring himself to use the word thirst any more for something so prosaic. On the way to Angel's Fall, it appeared in a vision and pointed the way to water. "You are serious?" said Galileon. He looked at Dante with new eyes. Dante nodded. "I do not lie. I swear it by the blood." The sergeant shrugged uneasily and looked around to see if they were overheard. The other scouts continued to prepare, too excited to pay attention to the conversation. "If that is true, then it means something. Best speak with the chaplains. See what they have to say. It is their task to divine the meaning of such mysteries, not mine, thanks Sanguinius." "I have spoken with them. I was told not to speak of it." "Then you have already said too much. The chaplains do not make such bans lightly." He became thoughtful and looked out over the maelstrom engulfing the plain. "None of that will matter one drop of blood if we lose this battle. Ready your steeds." Galileon shouted, "The orcs die today!" He twisted his throttle, making his bike roar off, drawing his chainsword as he sped at the foe. Galileon leading the way, the scout squads thundered down the hillside into the raging battle. Chapter 15. Duty's Burden. 998.M41, Interplanetary Space, en route to the Aegis Diamondo, Cryptus System. Autumn Mail finished his reading and snapped shut the Book of Sanguinius, the volume that contained the most profound epithets of their Primarch. Music, beautiful but dolorous, played from behind the fretted screens either side of Sanguinius's statue. He rejoined his chaplain brothers, and Dante took the podium. Rows of brothers in their full war gear, repaired and repainted after the events of Kryptos, looked up to him. Drost and Amity Hope were small figures at the front. The broad space before the podium was occupied by dozens of biers. On each one was the corpse of a fallen brother, shrouded in tight winding sheets from head to foot. Their necks were covered with white bandages, pinned in place with gold blood-drop badges, covering the wounds where their progenoids had been excised. They lay like the ancient mummies of old earth, awaiting a resurrection that could not come. They were each as dead as their progenitor. Though every space marine in the strike force was present, Flesh Terror and Blood Angel, along with all the mortal humans they had rescued and all the blood thralls not on duty, the chapel was only half full. Dante had never seen it fully occupied, not even back in his earliest days when the chapter was mightier. Every turn he took in the ship confronted him with another truth of the failing Imperium. The days of the legions were so immeasurably distant he could not imagine seeing the room full. In those days, the assembled chapters would have filled the hall 50 times over. There would not have been enough space on the Blade of Vengeance to accommodate them. He wondered fleetingly if the ship remembered those times, and if, under the surging violence of its machine spirit, it regretted their passing. His thoughts remained his own. Not one trace of his exhaustion or his doubt entered his voice. Sanguinius's mask amplified his words to fill the chapel in a way his warriors could not. "Brothers, brave soldiers of the Imperium, sisters of the Ministorum orders, we ask you here today to share in our grief at the loss of so many brave souls. Yet do not despair. By their efforts the progress of the High Fleet Leviathan has been slowed, and it might yet be turned away from Baal. We shall never relent in our defiance, not until every last drop of Sanguinius's blood has been spilt from our veins." He looked down at the list of names before him. The tragedy of the losses at Kryptos gnawed at him. He was empty inside, tired beyond comprehension. War no longer fired his soul. If he could, he would lay down his burden and depart into the trackless wastes of the galaxy. But he could not. "We remember Brother Sergeant Fariel," he intoned, "Sergeant of Squad Fariel, Tactical Squad, 2nd Battle Company, hero of the Dyrian Purge, master sculptor, beloved by his brothers, respected by his captain, slain upon Eros, securing our victory. Brother Fariel." He held out a hand to the first corpse. Blood-thrall beer-bearers went to the slab Fariel rested on and lifted the board bearing his corpse high onto their shoulders. The names were in no order, the intention not to raise the deeds of any brother over another. They were equal in death by dint of dying. Differences in rank no longer mattered. "Brother Moria, Specialist Weapons for Squad Arias, Tactical Squad, 2nd Battle Company, a fine shot and calmer of machine spirits, accomplished poet. Brother Moria." Again he lifted his hand. 4 more blood thralls came forwards and lifted up the corpse. The list went on and on. Slowly but surely the chapter emptied of the dead, and a small weight was added to Dante's burden. He came to the name of ancient Castor, slain on Asphodex fighting alongside Carleon. Dante's memory was no longer perfect. There is only so much information a man can hold in his mind, enhanced or not. But he could recall the loss of every man he had ever fought alongside, their triumphs and failures, their habits, their faces, and their prowess. How many Castors had he known? Castor was the name of the dreadnought. Kezalon had been his original name, unbeaten until cut down by the Eldar. There was another Castor obliterated by the demon Skarbrand at Pandemonium. He remembered both men, their lives separated by 100 years. 4 more warriors named Castor he could bring to mind that he had known personally. Their deeds ran into each other, preserved in Dante's recollections. Then there was the Castor who had given his name to the machine when first it was activated. There were others in the records. It was of no consequence. The blood was all, Sanguinius's sacred vitae, and it had been spilt in tragic abundance. Ancient Castor of the Death Company, who died his 2nd death in the service of the Emperor. Ancient Castor, who was Kezalon before his first death. Sergeant in the 2nd Company in life. Sword champion. Thereafter in his first death, the fury of the blooded. Many foes fell to his blade. Now he is Castor no more, and he is Kesalon again in the second death. May his deeds be remembered under both his names. The corpse he gestured to was smaller than the others. Dante remembered his first death well. The captain had been cut in half and left to die. Sheer will kept him alive long enough to be interred in the dreadnought. He died his second death, honourably, said Dante. His departure from the ritual made the chaplains and sanguinary priests look at him in curiosity. He was defiant to the end, as we shall all be. He pulled himself back before he could reveal the true nature of his feelings. The body was taken away. The next name awaited his utterance. Many others followed. When the last of the names were spoken and the bodies taken away, Dante bid his guests good-bye, and went with his captains and his priests of red and black to lay his men to temporary rest. Marmoreal silences greeted the blood angels as they entered the sepulchre of the fallen. Marble shelves waited for the bodies of the dead to carry them home to Baal, where they would be interred with the heroes of the ancestors. That could be decades hence, and the sepulchre of the fallen was chilled to 100 degrees below zero to preserve their mortal remains for their burial. Carbon mists curled around their feet. The party did not have far to go down the shelves. The catacombs were mostly empty. The blade of vengeance had been at home often in Dante's reign, for Baal had been threatened several times. The shelves stretched off in frozen quietude, with spaces for more bodies than there were space marines in the entire chapter. Dante waited in silence as the warriors were laid into their niches. Audermail and Corbulo carried out their brief ceremonies over each one, whispering words into ears that could not hear them. The bodies were sealed beside heavy glass screens that fogged immediately. Frost spied the gold of Dante's armour by the time they had finished. Ice cracked from the joints as he moved. "It is done, my lord," said Audermail. Dante nodded in acknowledgment. He did not have the heart to say more. They approached the Aegis Daimondo not long after. Dante took to the command deck of the Blade of Vengeance as the wall of ice and rock approached. Asante and Bellerophon directed the efforts of the ship and armada. Most of the other officers had dispersed among the fleet to their own vessels and companies, leaving Dante to contemplate the barrier with Corbulo and Mephiston. The area was free of Tyrannid vessels. Occasional activity around the gunnery stations preceded the thrum of energy discharge or the muted rumble of a solitary cannon, barely audible over the constant vibration of the ship as it pushed its way through the void. Weapons fire grew rarer and eventually stopped. The Aegis Daimondo was a field of ice that filled the ship's oculus and displays, an uncountable number of objects tinted a rose-pink by the light of the red scar. The ices were compressed to unimaginable density by temperatures that somehow exceeded absolute zero. It was a total barrier to imperial shipping. Anything that attempted passage was frozen out of existence. The Aegis's presence forced a risky in-system warp exit. The resources of the Cryptus system had been so vast that the inevitable losses had been regarded as acceptable. It had been hoped that it would provide an uncrossable barrier to the Tyrannids. The deployment of any military force to Cryptus at all evidenced unusual foresight on the part of the High Lords. The Aegis had not stopped the Tyrannids, nor had the military. Cryptus was dead, locked into its frozen tomb, as Dante's warriors were preserved in the sepulchre. Planetoids of superfluids and exotic ices resolved themselves from the mass of objects. According to Drost, the High Fleet had passed through, freezing over with a protective sheath of ice and emerging alive despite its organic nature. If the likes of the Aegis cannot halt the Tyrannid advance, nothing can stop them, Dante thought, but kept his misgivings to himself. "How is it possible, my lords, that the Tyrannids breached the Aegis?" he asked instead. Corbulo answered first. "The physical explanation is thermal regulation of the Tyrannid vessels, but their output would have to be equal to that of a dwarf star. Vessels warmed by fusion reactors have frozen solid, killing every soul on board. The Tyrannids do not appear to produce their energy this way. Mere biochemistry could not have warmed them enough. They are dormant as they travel across interstellar space, where the temperature is low but still greater than that of the Aegis. My opinion is that they should never have woken from their hibernation after passing the Aegis. There is no physical explanation for what they accomplished. The metaphysical explanation, my Lord of Death? Asked Dante of Mephiston. The whole of the Red Scar is shot through with anomalous phenomena, my lord. There is the touch of the warp upon the Aegis especially, weak, but enough to pervert the natural order of the material realm. Perhaps the shadow of the hive mind afforded some additional protection. Its blanketing of the warp may have divorced the Aegis from whatever cools it so, allowing them passage. That makes some sense, said Corbulo. Testing of the regions they breached would have to be undertaken to prove your hypothesis. Such work is for the adepts of the Adeptus Mechanicus, not for we blood angels, said Mephiston. The Aegis did not stop them. We must find another way. That is all we need to know. My brothers, Asante said to them from the command podium, we approach the thermal tunnels. All ships prepare to follow these exact coordinates, said Bellerophon, voxing the captains of the fleet. For a while the fleet slowed, rearranging itself from broad battle formation into a column headed by the Blood Angels, with the Flesh Tearers as rear guard. The Aegis was now directly before them, a boundless field of eerily still objects. It looked like the messy space of objects that mark the borders of most star systems, but Dante could feel the supernatural chill of it through the warding of the ship's shields and hull. Asante ordered the hololith lit. A cartolith of the passages through the Aegis showed dull orange on blue-white. There the rules of reality held sway, and the void was the temperature it should be. "Helm, engage on my mark," said Asante. The blade of vengeance slid like a dagger into the field, moving past giant rocks and balls of dirty ice. The thermal passage looked like every other part of the Aegis. One mistake would see them all frozen for eternity. The temperature of the command deck fell. Clouds of steam issued from every unshielded mouth. Dante's cooling systems reduced their efforts, allowing the reactor strapped to his back to warm him. But it was a feeble heat, as if someone were holding a warm coal a foot away from his naked back on a winter's night. Warning runes blinked on his faceplate display. Temperatures tumbled away. The ship's ventilation system roared as it pumped warm air onto the command deck, but it could not lift the chill. An equilibrium was struck. The ship laboured hard to keep its fragile occupants alive in the face of this cosmic anomaly. The unnatural cold reached out to kill them. Without the thermal tunnel, death would have been inevitable. Asante ordered the ship to accelerate. "What is your estimation for emergence, brother Captain Asante?" asked Dante. "We will be through in 9 hours, my Lord Commander," he said. "Inform me when we break out of the system," he said, and departed the command deck. He had promised Arofeo that he would sleep. So sleep he would. Dante slept little away from Baal. There was always too much to do, too many decisions that had to be taken, and the actions of his underlings to be overseen and reversed if necessary. Thousands of souls looked to him for guidance. Billions more depended on his protection. His Space Marine's physiology kept him alert. Sleep did little for him. Only with respite in a hall of sarcophagi could he restore his soul. Ultimately, he was human and needed to sleep, else he would never have agreed to Arofeo's request. When the message came, he was twitching on his ornate bed, enmeshed in dreams, awash with blood. Armies of traitor legionaries marched across the faces of burning worlds. The traitor Primarchs led their twisted legions upon the path of blood, and the screams of trillions of human beings shook the fabric of reality. The universe rippled. Hosts of demons poured from bleeding cuts in the sky. Brazen bells, thick with dripping verdigris, told doom, doom, doom. Dante was surrounded on all sides. Overhead a giant face manifested, leering down at him with a certainty of triumph. "Horus!" gasped Dante. A giant clawed hand reached down to pluck him up and crush him. "My lord!" Arofeo's voice was muffled by the hellish tumult. "My lord!" Small hands shook his arm. Dante came awake all of a sudden. Still ensnared in the horrors of his dream, his hand shot out and grabbed Arafeo by the throat. His teeth bared, his face flushed, his gifts pushed his system into battle readiness. "My lord, please! It is I!" Arafeo's athletic fingers pried unsuccessfully at Dante's crushing grip. Dante's fangs pricked at his lips. The blood thrall's pulse thrilled under his fingertips. "My lord, please!" The crushing pressure at Arafeo's throat released. The Lord Commander's face cleared. Arafeo staggered back. Dante leapt out of his bed and went to his equerry's side, steadying Arafeo with hands that moments before had tried to choke him to death. "My servant!" Remorse choked Dante. I am sorry. Have I harmed you? My dreams have been dark of late. Are you hurt? Look at me." Arafeo sagged against a couch. Dante grasped his face gently and turned it from side to side. The wrinkled skin of Arafeo's neck was discolouring. "How long did I sleep?" demanded Dante. "You have slept not 7 hours, my lord. I obey your command, as you asked." "Then we are not free of the Aegis, Diamondo. Forgive me. You have done your duty well. I am out of sorts." "I understand, my lord." The rebuke that Arafeo could never understand fought to be free of Dante's throat. "I could have broken your neck. You were seconds from death."
"But I am not dead. I am well, my lord."
Arafeo gasped hoarsely.
"It was I who asked that you rest. I should be more careful in my care in future."
Dante smiled a little. "Your spirits are unharmed at least, my friend. There is a messenger here for you from the Astropathicum, Adept Kostchin." Dante shook his head. He had no knowledge of the man. The servants of his chapter numbered in the thousands, all told, and they lived and died so quickly the lesser of them did not register on his notice. "Alert my arming thralls. Send refreshment to this Kostchin. I will greet the adept in my armour." He turned his face further away from Arafeo into the shadows.
"Of course, my lord, it shall be done,"
said the aged thrall. Dante came to his audience chamber garbed and masked for war. The room was sized appropriately for its purpose and decorated to emphasize the majesty of the blood angels. The adept, a mortal servant of the astropaths, looked lost under the painted dome. The servants of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica rarely had cause to leave their quarters, and he eyed the statues ringing the chamber as if they would smite him. His posture became submissive when Dante strode in. The adept quaked under Dante's inscrutable red-glass gaze and averted his eyes, his expression a mix of awe and terror. "I do not know you."
"I am Adept Kostchin, my lord, translator extraordinary to Lord Astropath Prime Jareth."
"You are blessed. Jareth has served me well for 2 centuries. He is a good man."
Kostchin nodded too fervidly. "It is an honor to serve him. My post is a new one. I have never had the pleasure of making your acquaintance."
The man was terrified. Dante took a step back and moderated his tone, mindful of his effect on mortal minds. "I am sure you will also give my chapter many good years of devotion, adept. You have a message for me?"
"I have. It is here, my lord." He held out a parchment. "It is from High Chaplain Estorath the Grim."
"I was told communications would not be possible until we were further from the mind shadow of the great devourer, and that would not be until we were free of the Aegis Diamondo."
"The shadow in the warp lessens, my lord. This message was sent at extreme boost through astropathic lensing stations at the highest priority grade, and so we knew immediately that it was of the gravest import. Astropath Prime Jareth received it an hour ago. We expedited its translation and have been processing the message for you since its arrival."
"Text or image encoding?"
"Text only, my lord. There are image components, but the transliteration of the astropath's reading into finished picts will take time."
He held out the scroll with shaking hands.
"It was highly encrypted, iambic hexameter duocoding. The metaphors were of the rarest kind and required 3 shifts of translation."
Dante took the message delicately in his gold-armoured fingers, searching for something positive to say to this cowering man. "The ink is still wet," he said. "You did well to bring it to me with such dispatch. You have my thanks." The adept bowed, but tensed as Dante opened the seal and unrolled the scroll. Kostya knew the content and feared the reaction it would produce. Dante read the message in one glance, his gauntlet clenched, rumpling the parchment. "Thank you, adept. You are dismissed." The cold anger in Dante's voice shook the mortal to the core. He left, bowing, turning to hurry off as soon as he thought he was out of sight. Although he had memorized the message, Dante read it once more, scarcely believing it to be true. Framed between the humdrum information of the astro-telepathic process, the heraldic coding of the Fifth Company, Astaroth's signum data of relay stations, the names of the astropaths involved, and every paragraph signifier rendered in exquisite calligraphy, was news of such import that Dante was at a loss for the first time in centuries. "Lord Commander, grave tidings from the Cadian Gate. Abaddon has emerged from the Eye of Terror at the head of a black crusade of unprecedented size. Auguries are unclear, but ill portent is everywhere to be seen. The demon primarchs are abroad. Thousands of ships essay into real space. Cadia is attacked. I have reports that the thrice-damned Skarbrand has emerged once more into the material realm and comes in the van of the traitors' hordes. The Diamor system is assailed. The priests of Mars have been conducting excavations there, and I cannot think it by chance that the arch-traitor leads his forces against the system now. Whatever the tech priests have uncovered cannot be allowed to fall into the hands of the enemy. I have instructed Captain Sendini to accompany me to Diamor, along with the full strength of the demon-banes. I petition you to directly send as many warriors to me as can be spared to aid in the defence of Diamor. Should the great enemy break free of the gate, Abaddon has enough vessels and warriors to drive for Terra. I realize this puts the Baal system at risk. However, I judge that the presence of our chapter will have a large beneficial effect upon the morale of Imperial forces gathering to repel the traitors. This war was begun by our forebears. We should finish it. The decision is yours to make, my lord, yet I hope you trust my counsel and have faith enough in the wider brotherhood of Sanguinius that they might keep Baal from harm. I await your reply as soon as it may be delivered. Your obedient servant, High Chaplain Astaroth." Dante's soul withered in him. Another choice between two evils. He had fought his earlier years full of hard-won victories. The difficulties of those times were nothing compared to the dilemmas that tormented him daily. As he read and reread the missive, his composure broke. Dante howled in fury, ran at the wall, and slammed his perfect golden fist into the mosaic there, destroying a portion of ancient artwork a yard square and denting the metal beneath. Shattered tesserae tinkled to the floor. The door burst inwards. A pair of Dante's sanguinary guard came in, weapons raised. Arafeo came after them. "My lord," said Arafeo. "Commander," asked one of the sanguinary guard. Dante swayed back from the wall, his hand up. "It is nothing, brother Dontoriel. Return to your post. As you command it." The sanguinary guard scanned the room a last time and left. Arafeo did not leave, but approached carefully. "What is it, my lord?" "Dire news from Astaroth. A new threat as bad as the Devourer." Dante's armor felt unbearably claustrophobic, and he sank into a crouch. He had a fleeting memory of a boy who had sat like that habitually, but he could not remember his name. "Will you convene your brothers, my lord? You have but to ask, and I shall pass on your summons." Behind Sanguinius's mask, Dante closed his eyes and bowed his head in reflection. The purring whine of his armor systems irritated him. He longed for the dry silences of Baal. "I must think on this a while. I shall speak with them after we are free of the Aegis. We can do nothing for the time being but fret at the problem, and I need to consider this carefully before I make any decision." Chapter 16. Red Thirst. 471.M40. Lost Colony. Arius 5. Arius System. Jet turbines roared upon Dante's back, arcing him over the rough barricades surrounding the Oreti camp. Dante crashed through leafless trees and came down, firing. His bolt pistol kicked satisfyingly in his hand. Every shot ended the life of a scavenger. Dante slammed into the ground at the center of the camp, denting the packed earth. The Oreti brandished their odd-looking guns at him. In return, he gunned his chainsword. The small Xenos scattered, shrieking. Gathering their weapons under them in their mismatched belly appendages, they loped away at surprising speed, knuckling along on their long forelimbs, powerful thrusts from their single back limbs accelerating them away. Dust puffed up from the dry ground behind their hooves. Long grasses rattled frantically as they sped through, then fell still. Dante scanned the sparse woodlands. The Xenos had supposedly overrun the colony of Erius, but they seemed too few in number to have done so, and the planet looked undisturbed for decades. His helm overlays revealed nothing. The Oreti had gone. Jump packs howled as Lorenz landed next to him, Ristan coming next. Giacomus, Arvin, and Sergeant Basilius completed their squad. They spread out, peering into the dirty tents of the Oreti. Arvin lifted piles of rags with the end of his chainsword distastefully. "Filthy Xenos," he said. "Look at this place, worse than animals." "The area is clear," said Giacomus from one end of the camp. Dante knocked down a hut roofed with fabric. Besides a few bones around a dead fire, it was empty. "Nothing here either, Sergeant," he said. Their jump engines whined down. Chainswords purred to a stop. An unnatural quiet fell. The myriad animals in the bush held their silence. "We should not be here. These things are no threat," growled Lawrence, towing the shredded remains of an Oreti. There wasn't much left but a few jointed, insectile limbs and rag. Its blood stained the ground. The sight made Dante's lips tingle. "They are pathetic foes. One bolt round and there is nothing left of them," said Giacomus. "Quiet," said Sergeant Basilius, holding up his hand irritably. He pulled his auspex from his belt and bent his head to the screen. Far off, a beast roared. The Space Marines fanned out into a defensive circle without thinking. Arvin lifted his pistol to cover the shadows. Dante shifted his grip on his chainsword. "Sounds big," said Giacomus. "Sounds angry," said Lawrence. "Let us go and fight that instead. There is more honor there than exterminating these weaklings." "I will kill them all, weak or not," said Arvin fiercely. Dante and Lawrence turned to look at him, such was his vehemence. "I said silence," said Basilius. Lawrence made a dismissive sound, but obeyed. Arvin growled. The quiet chirruping of the auspex filled the clearing. The camp was small, 3 interlinked circles around campfires, fenced by barricades of scavenged metal. "The Colonia is that way," said Basilius, gesturing to the north with his auspex. "Spread out, stay low to the ground." "We should be fighting a better war," Lawrence voxed Dante. "This scale of action is beneath us. How many colonists were there here? 2,000? Send more is what I say." "We are obliged to defend every world of the Emperor, brother," said Dante, "no matter how small. If they send more people and there is insufficient military presence, they will die." "Commander Millinus should be more selective in responding to requests for aid," grumbled Lawrence. He kicked over a charred log in a fit of pique, scattering ashes. "Dante, Lawrence, concentrate." Basilius cut into their private conversation. "No talking, anyone. You're not so long into your black carapace that I can't knock you down, and I will if you don't stay alert." Basilius's suit was artfully decorated where the other's plate was plain. The style suggested a considered artist. In truth, Basilius was, but he was also an exceptionally angry man. He had to be, to keep the impetuous young space marines in check. There had been one older brother in their squad, acting as battle squad leader when the unit split, but as their campaign had proceeded, he had been reassigned to other duties, leaving Basilius with a band of hotheads to chaperone alone. "I don't see why we can't fly," muttered Ristan. All of them yearned to. Flight was in their blood, a legacy of Sanguinius's gene seed. Basilius halted. With swift battle sign, he sent his squad out wide either side of him, Lawrence with Dante and Ristan on the right, Giacomus with Arvin on the left. Arvin ran forwards brashly. "Easy!" voxed Basilius. Runes blinked up on Dante's faceplate as Basilius took temporary control of the display. A cartograph overlaid the view through his lenses. "The Colonia," Basilius communicated via vox text reinforced with battle sign. "Expect resistance. Dante and Lawrence scout ahead. Provide suitable attack point. Stealth, brothers. Do not alert the enemy." Dante and Lawrence signalled their affirmatives and stole forwards, sharp orange grasses rasping on their power armour. Despite their heavy armour, their stealth was commendable, the blood angels dropping their shoulders so that their jump packs did not knock on the branches of the dwarf trees, the footfalls of their heavy boots close to silent. A wall of creepers appeared between the trees. Leaves rustled in the warm wind, flashing glimpses of crumbling plascrete. "The Colonia Wall," said Dante. Dante signalled he would take the primary position. Lawrence nodded, took shelter by the earthen spires of some communal creature's nest, and covered his brother with his pistol. Dante approached the covered wall, pulling away the vines. Chunks of plascrete came away with it. The roots had penetrated deeply. The metal fence that would have continued the barrier another 5 meters upwards had fallen, rusted strands of it providing a framework for plants to climb. Dante crumbled the decaying material between his fingers. On Baal Secundus, structures that had been ruined 12,000 years were periodically uncovered by the sand, perfectly preserved at the moment of their destruction. Less than 20 years had passed on Erius V since the colony had gone quiet. Already the stamp of man upon the world was melting away. The power of vital worlds fascinated him. Life was potent. He looked back to Lawrence and signed that he should shadow him, then proceeded along the wall. Through gaps in the fortification's length he saw tumbled ruins, similarly covered in vegetation. It was quiet. The landscape lived gently. The sounds of growth and small animals rustling in the undergrowth were crisp in his ear beads. His breathing mask was open, admitting the healthy sense of a vibrant ecosystem. Soft wind played over his armour. The temperature was 42 degrees. He saw all of this as readout runes, but felt none of it. Caution forbade him from taking off his helmet. The energy weapons the Areti carried were too weak to penetrate Adeptus Astartes' power armour, but they would easily hollow out a bare head. They came to the gates. A road, made of prefabricated rockcrete sections, led away into the scrub, its flat surface broken up by the actions of tree roots and crowded with waving grasses. Finding the road's position without the reference to the gates would have been impossible. Lawrence joined Dante. "We have reached the gates, Sergeant," voxed Dante. "We proceed." "Understood," said Basilius. "Keep vox to a minimum. I'm detecting no electromagnetic informational traffic, but prudence is the ward of life." The vox clicked out. "Basilius doesn't like us," said Lawrence. He kept his voice low, but there was an edge to it through his suit vox grill that helped it carry. "Do you think?" said Dante. "It's nothing personal. I hear he's been a sergeant to assault marines for a century and a half. If his humours were better balanced, he would have been promoted to captain." "I'll be a captain one day," said Lawrence. "We've been full brothers for less than 4 years. You're getting ahead of yourself," said Dante. They skirted the overgrown road. Avians cawed from their roosts in the wrecked Colonia buildings. The rusting hull of a Taurox military transport blocked the road. Dante pointed to blast damage in its side. "That's heavy projectile weaponry damage. The Areti didn't do that." "How do you know?" said Lawrence, leaning around the tank and tracking his pistol across the terrain. "Nobody knows anything about them. They're not in the chapter records. Because all we've seen them wield are weak particle beams. Maybe they've got something stronger." "You were the one that said they were feeble," said Dante. "That they are," said Lawrence. "Lord Millinus knew that. Otherwise he would have sent more than 2 squads to deal with them. They're just another beggar race, picking over the rubbish of better species. This is a waste of our time." "Doesn't their lifestyle remind you of anything?" said Dante. They jogged down the street. The purr of their armour blended into the hush of the day. "They're not like the Barlights," said Lawrence. "Our life made us hard. It made us fit to be angels. These things are weak. We'll kill them all, and it'll be as if they never were." The Colonia was laid out to a standard settlement pattern dredged out of an STC. A grid of streets with designated areas for industry, governance, and habitation. Neatness was inherent to its conception. "Hard to believe a hive world can spring from a seed like this," said Dante. "Maybe they all start out like this. Some must. But this seed died on stony ground. There will be no human domination here for some time," said Lawrence. Dante took a deep breath of the fragrant air. Such clean atmosphere, free of the taint of chemicals. He had recently visited his first hive world, and beneath inculcated indifference, found it profoundly shocking. He struggled to regret the colony's failure. "The centre!" With his bolt pistol, Dante gestured to the crumbling edifices of administratum buildings. "I see something," said Lawrence. "There!" Dante caught a flash of movement darting across the street. Lawrence raised his gun and sent a spray of bolts shooting after it. "By the wings of our Lord, I missed the little creck," said Lawrence angrily. Without warning, he wrenched his chainsword from his belt, ignited his jump pack, and flew down the street. The silence of the ruined town shattered. "Wait!" shouted Dante, but Lawrence was frustrated, and his blood was up. He landed, sending up a spray of powdery rockcrete from the road, and charged around the corner, firing. The fizzing pop of Areti weapons welcomed him. Dante opened full vox channels. "Basilius, this is Dante. I have found the rest of the Areti crew. They're in the Colonia Center. These coordinates." He sent a data squirt from his suit's cogitator. "Hold and wait for reinforcement," voxed Basilius back. "Negative, Sergeant. Lawrence is engaged. I am following." Not wishing to receive the inevitable order to wait, Dante ignited his jump engines. He welcomed the push of them as they lifted him from the ground. So powerful, the thrust tugging at his shoulders and waist. His annoyance at Lawrence vanished in the roar of turbines. Both his hearts pumped hard. The anticipation of combat fired the gifts of the Emperor, flooding his system with synthetic hormones. The flight from Angel's Leap 10 years ago was nothing to jumping into combat. By the time he landed, his teeth were clamped hard together in a wild grin. He jumped again, daring to burn the pack's limited fuel reserves to attain something close to true flight. With consummate skill, he swerved around the moss-draped statuary of a building shell and landed in the town centre. The Areti had laid out large sheets of fabric in the square. Upon them, the components of deconstructed machines were set out neatly. Such work suggested the creatures were not aware of the destruction of their scows in orbit, or maybe they were, and this salvage had been intended for a defensive purpose he could not divine. It was pointless trying to second-guess Xenos. They were, by their nature, unknowable and contemptible. Lawrence was embattled on the plaza. Dozens of Areti were firing on him from windows. Their energy slashes scorched his armor around his head, turning the yellow of his helmet brown and black. There were larger things in combat with him, 3 beings twice the height of a space marine. They had the same overall shape as the lesser Areti, 2 long forearms, a stumpy limb tail, and an array of specialized limbs on the chest. But where the lesser things were covered by loose robes, the larger creatures wore plates of iridescent armor. Helmets covered their long heads. They brandished a variety of pistol-type weapons with their chest arms that discharged particle beams. These were as inoffensive to battleplate as the fusils carried by the lesser Areti, but the creature's powerful forelimbs were tipped with gleaming blades that did pose a threat. The aliens reared up on their thrusting limb tails to drive down and strike at Lawrence. He dodged between their blades. A pair of swords slashed at him, and he caught them on the edge of his chainsword. Sparks flew from the weapon. With a grunt, he threw the creature back and was immediately set upon by the other 2 larger creatures before he could finish the first. Dante thundered down among them, bolt pistol blazing. 5 bolts hammered into the side of one of the creatures, punching through its gleaming armor as if it were paper. Multiple explosions blew out craters the length of its body. Subsidiary arms flew everywhere. It rocked back on its muscular limb tail, exposing pulsing organs within its ruined torso, threw its head back, and died. Loosing bolts in every direction, Dante slammed into the melee. "Brother!" shouted Lawrence. "I may have been hasty." "We should have waited," said Dante, aiming a blow at an alien leg. The Space Marines twisted around each other until they were back to back, facing 1 creature each. He meant to chastise his squad-mate, but he was joyous. He did not mean what he said. Who would want to wait when battle beckoned? "What by the pits of Baal are these things?" said Lawrence. "Warrior forms? The little ones could be the males and the big females, or vice versa. Does it matter? They're all trying to kill us." Dante raised his gun. A knock from a limb blade sent his shots wide and jarred it from his hand. Anger seized him at the affront to his war gear. Taking up his chainsword, he roared and threw himself forwards, beating back the alien with a flurry of violent blows. Lawrence ducked a blade that hummed as it parted the air. "These are the females?" he shouted. "Ha! I like this better. Their women fight properly." Jump packs roared. Arvin slammed into the middle of the fight. If Dante felt fury, it was nothing to Arvin's rage. "Kill them! Kill them!" he shouted. Dante advanced on the retreating alien, but Arvin knocked him aside. "This is my kill! I will deliver the killing blow!" he shouted. Though furious that his prize had been stolen, Dante was wary at Arvin's tone, and stood back. The others landed around the melee, peeling off into the buildings. Roofless halls echoed to the reports of bolt guns, the squealing of aliens, and chainsword song. The volleys of particle beams decreased dramatically. In less than 3 minutes, the aliens were dead. Lawrence had dropped his female. Arvin's was dead, and he would not stop hitting it over and over again, flinging sprays of blood and ground-up meat up the walls. "It is dead, brother! Come away!" Dante touched Arvin's shoulder. Arvin rounded on him and punched him in the face with the spiked guard of his sword, cracking his helm lens. Dante staggered back. Arvin raised his weapon over his head and roared incoherently. "He wants to kill me," thought Dante. "Stop him! Pin him down!" Basilius was shouting. His brothers joined their cries of alarm to the sergeant's, but their voices sounded distant, something from a fading memory. Dante was preoccupied by Arvin's sword swinging down in a heavy overarm blow. Time seemed to slow. Dazed, he raised his weapon to meet Arvin's. Their blades met, teeth shattering, and time resumed its normal pace. The force of the blow staggered Dante. Arvin had the strength of a man possessed. "Stop him! Stop him!" shouted Basilius. Another blow hammered down on Dante. The chains of both blades ground together again. Arvin's unspooled onto the floor. Dante's jammed up the drive unit, causing the motor to ignite. Dante threw the weapon aside in time to catch Arvin as he jumped. Dante grabbed him, bringing them both to the ground. How dare you? You take me away from my prize, my kill, my soul tally!" Arvin's combat discipline had gone, and he scrabbled at Dante's head like a madman. Dante could not retaliate effectively. He was struggling to stop his helmet being torn off.
"Get off him!"
shouted Lawrence. He locked his arm around Arvin's shoulder, but was thrown back. He returned. Riston grabbed Arvin's other arm, Giacomus grasping the stabilization vents on his backpack. Together they hauled Arvin off Dante and threw him down. Arvin lumbered to his feet, ready to attack again. Lawrence tackled him around the midriff, and they both crashed to the floor again. Dante got up. He was physically shaking inside his armor. In part, this was due to the shock of his brother's attack, but largely he wrestled with his own desire to fight Arvin. The kill had been rightly his, not Arvin's. His brother's temerity infuriated him. His heart pounded, his vision tunneled. Arvin bucked and shouted under the weight of Lawrence and Giacomus. Reeling, Dante turned away, battling his rising bloodlust. He made himself concentrate on his suit, running through the post-battle checklist. "Focus, focus, the first grace," he whispered. "Be respectful of your battle gear," he said. His breath was hot in his helmet. "Be mindful of your armor. Restraint, restraint, restraint." A shudder ran through him. So powerful his armor whined oddly as it sought to match the movement, and his neural jacks tugged in their sockets. "My weapons," he said. He had lost his bolt pistol and his sword. He went to retrieve both, whispering calming mantras as he did so. As he picked up his wrecked sword, he noticed one of the Areti females lived. Its back stump leg was twisted back on itself. One of its forelimbs was broken, the other hacked off at the elbow, leaking purple vitae. The nest of lesser limbs around its chest moved weakly. Dante levelled his gun at its long face. Multiple eyes blinked at him. "Peace, peace," it said in musical Gothic. "Take our salvage. We say for you these things," said the Areti, gesturing with bleeding manipulators at the neatly arrayed machinery. "We leave, no harm. This dead world, we think, but not dead, is yours. We mistake, we go." "Why did you attack us?" said Dante, and was surprised at the snarl in his voice. "We not attack. You attack." Dante's gun wavered. Feelings of disgust and hot rage battled with those of pity. This was a Xenos, an implacable enemy of man by its very nature, and yet it pleaded for mercy. Mercy was the third grace. He stared it in the eye. It held its arms up pleadingly. It was terrified. Dante dropped his weapon a fraction. The rest of his brothers were occupied with their raging comrade, but Arvin saw Dante hesitate.
"Kill it! I will kill it! Let me slay it! Let me drink its blood!"
raged Arvin. He attempted to get at the wounded alien, dragging Lawrence and Giacomus with him. Basilius slammed Arvin in the chest, knocking him off balance so that Lawrence and the others could subdue him. The sergeant ripped off his helmet.
"Arvin, calm yourself," he ordered. "All of you, focus."
"Sergeant, this one lives. It calls for clemency," said Dante. Basilius looked back. Savagery had replaced dignity on his face, contorting it into something wild. His eyes were bloodshot and his fangs extended.
"What are you doing, Dante? Kill it! It is Xenos! It does not deserve to live! Do not hesitate!"
Dante levelled his gun at the thing's head. The eyes arrayed on its long face widened. He couldn't stand the sight of its fear. Before he knew what he had done, he had obliterated its face with a shot from his gun to save himself from looking at it. The remaining few eyes shut slowly, and the corpse curled in on itself.
"Keep him down,"
ordered Basilius. He walked away from the ranting Arvin and activated the Vox pickup at his neck.
"This is Basilius. The Areti are dead. I have no indication of any more nearby. I doubt they were responsible for the disappearance of the colonists, but they have stripped the Colonia of all useful materials. By their profaning of the Emperor's world with their unclean tread, they earned death. Send extraction for us now. I declare this world cleansed. I will append the report to the Departamento Colonia, suggesting a heavier military presence for the next settlement attempt."
Arvin was still raging, his strength taxing the 3 Space Marines trying to hold him in place.
"Arvin, brother, it is us! Why do you fight?" shouted Lawrence.
He was panicking.
A warrior fearless in the face of the foe, he was frightened by Arvin's loss of control. "Let me go!" bellowed Arvin. "I shall crush their corpses, set their maimed bodies about this place. They will know fear. I will destroy them all." "Emperor's throne," snarled Basilius. "He will not calm. Hold him still," he said. Basilius took out his combat knife and went to the dead Areti. "What ails him?" said Lorenz. "It is the rage. The black rage has him," said Giacomus. "It is not the rage. It is the red thirst," said Basilius thickly, his control steadying the others. "It has him in its grip as it has me in its grip. I have a measure of my own passions, that is all." "We have all experienced the thirst," shouted Giacomus. "It has never been like this. I don't understand." "Then you have much to learn. There is only one medicine for this ailment. Get his helmet off." With evident disgust, he searched around an alien neck, then bent and cut once with his knife. He cupped his hand under the wound, filling it with the purple blood. Lorenz and Giacomo pinned Arvin's arms, while Riston grappled with his thrashing head. Finally, Riston got his fingers into the release catches at the top of the soft seal and yanked off Arvin's helm. Their brother had gone. A monster had taken his place. The veins throbbed on Arvin's neck and face. His alabaster skin had turned crimson, his eyes bulged, and the whites had reddened. His bared teeth snapped at the arms of his brothers, his fangs fully extended. "Hold him!" said Basilius. Careful not to spill the precious liquid, the sergeant brought his hand close to Arvin's mouth. "Drink, drink the vitae, let it slake your thirst, brother," said Basilius. Arvin let out a strangled howl. Basilius jammed the blade of his palm into Arvin's mouth, forcing his teeth wide. Arvin's fangs squeaked on ceramite. "Drink!" commanded Basilius. Blood slopped into Arvin's mouth. His thrashing calmed. With desperate lapse he licked up the blood from Basilius's hand. Lorenz, Ristan, and Giacomus stepped cautiously back. Arvin's face had lost its horrible red color. He licked frantically at the alien blood, eyes dilated. "He is blood-drunk," said Giacomus. "He will calm now," said Basilius, his face and voice hardly less savage than Arvin's. The young space marines looked hungrily on the blood, their own thirsts stirring. Basilius looked at them. "It is affecting you too. It is the way of our chapter that when one falls to the thirst, many follow. All of you, drink, quickly. Drink for the victory you have achieved. Drink for the glory of the Imperium. Drink for the memory of Sanguinius. Partake of the communion of blood. Wash away your savagery. Rediscover restraint, and through it seek forgiveness for this lapse." They had never partaken of such a libation, not in these circumstances. Blood, and the drinking of blood, were sacred to their chapter, but it was always done under the watchful eyes of the sanguinary priests. Gingerly at first they knelt by the alien body and removed their helms. Lorenz was first to kiss the alien's hide, his face wrinkled with disgust at the touch of it on his lips, even as his skin reddened in anticipation. Dante followed. The leathery flesh was still warm. Despite his abhorrence, his mouth watered. His fangs extruded themselves fully from his gums, piercing the skin. Spiced Xenos blood trickled into his mouth, spurring his appetite. With increasing need, he sucked at the wound, dragging in mouthfuls of the stuff. Fragments of alien memory spilt through his mind as he drank of its soul, his omophagia snagging bits of the dead creature's life. He knew the Areti then. They were wanderers, their world dead. They had never been numerous, and were in the twilight of their kind. He felt their sadness and their pain. They were not aggressive creatures, but carrion feeders, living off the leavings of the galaxy. Dante did not care. Blood was all there was. Their sorrowful story was submerged in a tide of red. He tasted the creature's death. Its fear broke the hold of the thirst over him, and he snatched his head back. Dante took a long, shuddering breath. He blinked, back in himself again. The stolen life of the alien coursed through his body, and he saw his fellows with clear eyes. Giacomus lapped blood from the ground. Lorenz sucked at its arm. Ristan had his face buried in the creature's chest, like a beast puppet the teat. What have we become? He wondered. But the thought was fleeting in the face of the thirst. The smell of vitae had his mouth watering. His reason retreated, and he returned to the corpse. There was blood to be drunk. Mercy be damned. Chapter 17. Black Rage. 518.M40. Holywell Hive, Tobias Holt, Holt System. This is Dante, requesting urgent support. We're cut off. Laziel was a dead weight on his armor streaked a wetter red from his brother's wounds. Dante pushed him on. His brother stumbled, his ragged breathing amplified by his vox grill. A power-armoured figure stepped into the end of the corridor, its defaced iconography streaked with rust and undercity filth. Dante fired one-handed and shot its hearts full of bolt rounds. The mass reactives blew, their explosions contained by the renegade's armor plating, and he fell down dead. "This is Dante. Can anyone hear me?" He moved on, dragging Laziel to his feet, glancing back over his shoulder. More traitors were filling the corridor. Bolt rounds crackled off broken sheets of plasteel hanging off the walls. Several whined off his armor. One exploded on his plastron, the detonation making the battle plate shiver. "Laziel, get up!" Shouted Dante. He fired back at the traitors, emptying his bolter at them. I can't," he said. He sagged against the wall. The renegades advanced, guns up through the cramped corridor. Their pauldrons scraped rust from the decaying walls. Small flies swarmed around yellow lumens set into the ceiling. A sense of dankness prevailed, though they were high in the atmosphere of Tobias Holt, well above the oceans. Dante braced himself, but the traitors did not fire.
"They want our gene seed,"
Dante snarled. Anger rose up in him. The pounding of his hearts became war drums. Before he could consider his actions, he was running at them, chainsword growling. He slammed into the first, rocking the fallen angel back on his feet.
"Traitor! Traitor!"
he yelled in the Space Marine's face. The warrior was knocked back, contacting with his fellows. A combat knife scraped a bright furrow across Dante's chest eagle. Dante elbowed his foe hard in the face, cracking his retinal lenses and staggering him further. The Purge, they called themselves, once loyal, now filthy acolytes of the god of plague. Their armor was painted green around the greaves and shoulders, black elsewhere. He reversed his chainsword and drove it point first through the traitor's chest. Blood fountained over him as the warrior died. Dante wrenched his weapon free. The traitor following the slain renegade fired at Dante. Bolts exploded on his armor, warning runes flashed all over his display, but he paid them no heed. The traitor Space Marine continued firing at Dante until his chainsword took the warrior's hand and gun off at the wrist. He took his blade and sawed up lengthways through the enemy's helm. Black blood spurted from his ruined respirator grill. Dante sprang forwards off the corpse, kicking a second foe hard in the leg, denting his armor and sending him off balance. Then he decapitated him. His sword snagged in the traitor's armor, and so he threw himself at the third warrior, screaming incoherently. The red thirst rose up through him, drowning his soul in a tide of bloody rage. His weight bore the traitor down, his hands locked about his neck. He buried his fingers in the vulnerable joint, pushing so hard his hands pierced metal soft seal and flesh alike. The traitor smashed at Dante, making his faceplate display fizz, but he did not relent. With a final crushing grip, he choked the life from the traitor and tore his helmet off. The warrior looked not so different to Dante, his face distorted in the same transhuman way, although he lacked Sanguinius's beauty. Dante wondered what Primarch had given this creature its gifts. It enraged him that supposedly loyal Adeptus Astartes would turn to chaos. His fangs slid from his gums. He wished to feast on this thing and steal the secrets of its mind. He opened his filters preparatory to removing his helmet. The rotten stink of the traitor's blood stopped him. It smelt rancid. Dante stood back, his thirst receding but not quenched. It could never be quenched. He went to the struggling Lazial and dragged him up again. "Come on," he said. "We have to keep moving." Dante helped his brother through the network of tunnels. Everywhere there were the emaciated corpses of citizenry. The Purge had occupied Tobias Holt and begun to systematically starve the inhabitants to death. Millions had died. Some of the bones they saw bore signs of butchery, inflicted as the desperate inhabitants resorted to cannibalism. The hive shook to explosions, hivequakes following in their wake, as the mountain-sized city shifted. At any moment he expected the whole edifice to collapse on them, but it held. His calls for aid went unheard.
"We have gone too deep," Laziel gasped. "They cannot hear us."
"Then we must get nearer to the hive skin," said Dante. They were on the brink of a shaft that disappeared into darkness 1,000 meters below them. Distant gunfire rattled down towards them from above. Dante struggled to orient himself. Holywell Hive was 6 kilometers wide. "Which way is it?" he said. Laziel leaned against the wall. His armour leaked blood and machine fluids in equal amount. The brakes in his armour were sticky with foaming shock gels. He wheezed painfully. Dante suspected at least one of his lungs had been punctured.
"Ask her,"
said Laziel. He pointed. Dante spun around. His bolter came up to aim at a wraith-thin girl in a dirty grey smock. He lowered his gun.
"Little one, we are the angels of the Emperor. We seek a way out. Can you help us?"
She came forwards fearlessly. She was around 12 Terran years old. Dante hoped that was old enough for her to tell the difference between loyalist and traitor.
"Food,"
she said. Dante nodded and knelt. Slowly, so as not to scare her, he took a ration biscuit from his belt.
"We were given these to give to you, so you would not starve," he said.
She snatched it from his hand, tearing its plastic package open with her teeth. She wolfed it down. Her threadbare dress blew against her, showing ribs made prominent by hunger.
"You know we're here to save you. We are not like the others."
She nodded.
"You are the Red Angels. Father says you are good. Come this way," she said.
Dante stood in relief. Still his thirst surged, but for now it was under control. He suffered thoughts of him ripping the girl's throat open and drinking her dry, but he discarded them, and they had no effect on his comportment.
"See," said Laziel as Dante grabbed his arm, "we must trust to those we protect to help us. With her aid, we will rejoin the Legion."
Dante froze.
"Legion, brother?" "Our chapter," said Laziel muzzily. "Our chapter."
Laziel's voice slurred. Dante hoped from pain. The alternative was too terrible to consider. They went up obliquely through manufactory districts emptied by deliberate starvation. Factory dormitories stood silent, the bones of the dead, shrouded by dust. They were moving away from the sounds of battle, and a deep quiet fell on the hive. Laziel became stronger and needed Dante's aid less and less, but his confusion grew. Dante faced a dilemma. He needed to signal his comrades, but if Laziel was succumbing to the black rage, then disaster beckoned. The girl darted into a crack. Dante peered after her. She had gone into the fabric of the hive via a fault line in its wall. Stalactites, orange with ferric compounds, hung from the ceiling. She stopped and beckoned to him. He examined the passage. Although tall, it was only just big enough for him to get into. He pushed Laziel in first.
"The palace will hold," said Laziel. "You will see."
"Laziel, stay with me, please. Remember who you are."
"I am Brother Laziel, and you are Brother Dante," he slurred.
"That's right. I am Dante. Now crawl. Stay focused on the present. The memories of our father reach for you. Resist them."
"Yes," he muttered. "I see them. I know, Dante. I will not fall. I swear."
The passage cut into a proper access way, although one long disused. The girl led them down this to a recently patched door. 2 sentries waited outside, stick-thin from starvation, clothes filthy and threadbare. Nevertheless, they were vigilant, and fell to their knees when they saw the blood angels emerge from the dark.
"My lords,"
one said. "On your feet, please. Do not bow," said Dante. "My brother needs urgent help. I have to contact my chapter." The men nodded. One rapped on the gate.
"Open! Open!"
he called. The gates swung wide. Another corridor, broken by barricades, led a short way before turning sharply right into another set of gates. Ragged men stood up from their firing positions to gape at the demigods in their midst. Dante ignored them, dragging the semi-conscious Laziel with him. The second gates opened into a large, galleried factory filled with people. They lay on makeshift beds and crammed every square inch between giant steel presses. They crowded the catwalks running across the width of the hall and sat in groups on balconies. Everywhere he looked, there were people. The warm fug of close human life hit the Space Marines. So much life, so much blood. Lazial stirred. Dante's worry grew. Saliva filled his mouth. "Who is in charge here?" Dante said. Many of the crowd knelt in supplication and made the sign of the Aquila, but they parted wide to let the Space Marines through. "Father," said the girl, running to a heavily bearded man. Like all of them, his cheeks were hollow and his eyes sunken from the lack of food. He embraced his daughter and approached the Space Marines. "I am Segeles, factory headman. I am in charge by the assent of my citizens. We are grateful to see you. The Emperor truly protects. We see that now, eh, brothers and sisters?" He shouted out to the room. A chorus of tired "Ayes" came back. "The war is not yet done," Dante said. "Do you have a room where I might lay my brother? He is sorely wounded." "Yes, of course." Segeles led the way to a small office. He ushered out the two families inside. Dante lowered Lazial to the ground, glad to be free of his weight. "Horus comes, brother," whispered Lazial. "What is he saying?" said Segeles, curiously. "He is delirious," said Dante, more sharply than he intended. "Please, a moment. I have to signal my brothers." "Of course." Segeles bowed and withdrew, closing the door after him. Too flimsy to hold a brother. Dante cursed inwardly. "Lazial, listen to me. You must remember." "Remember?" "The 5 graces. Remember?" "What graces?" he said feverishly. "The rule, Lazial, the 5 graces and the 5 virtues." "Rule? I impose no such thing on my sons." Dante's pulse rose with his anguish. He opened his vox channels. "This is Dante. Respond. We are separated from Squad Ophid. Please respond." A tense second followed. Dante nearly shouted in relief when the vox crackled in response. "Dante? This is Lawrence. We thought you were dead. The enemy is retreating. Victory approaches. Stay where you are, and we will come to retrieve you. Captain Avernus has located your suit signum. I warn you, it might take a while. There is a knot of resistance between us and you. Somehow you've pushed your way through the Purge's lines." "How long?" said Dante. He was whispering. "What is wrong?" "Lawrence, we have been taken in by a group of civilians. There are 1,000 or more of them." "It's good that someone has survived this horror." Dante's mouth went dry. "Lazial is badly wounded, Lawrence. He's falling." "Black or red?" The black rage. He's gibbering about legions and the imperial palace." The vox snapped. Avernus's voice replaced Lawrence's. "Dante, you must leave immediately. Get Lazial away from the citizens. Head for this rendezvous point here." A cartograph flashed across Dante's faceplate. A red dot pulsed upon it. "I will send someone to get you now. The route is harder, and you will be at risk, but you have to leave. Be ready for extraction in 1 hour." "Yes, Captain," said Dante. "Stay here," he said to Lazial. Lazial moaned. Dante stopped by the door. No fear. He felt no fear for himself. That part of the legend was true, but he feared greatly for the fate of the people in the machine hall. "Segeles, I need your help," he said as evenly as he could. "My brothers are coming to evacuate my injured comrade. I need to get to here." Quickly he sketched the map on the floor with the tip of an armoured finger, scratching it into the rockcrete floor. The mortals glanced at each other, amazed at the skill the rendition exhibited. "I recognize it. It is 1/2 a mile from here, an external port on the hive skin. Maintenance." The hive shook to a faint rumble. "Can you point me in the correct direction?" "It would be easier to show you," said Segeles. "It is not necessary." A cry came from Lazial. Dante weighed his options. He could probably get there on his own, but if he didn't— "Very well, take me, but only a few of you. We cannot risk attracting the enemy's attention." That was not the reason. Dante could not tell them of the risk Lazial posed to them. Better a few die than many. "We shall leave immediately. Zelga, Bozots, get your guns and your crews." He spoke again to Dante, face bright with pride. "I will lead you out, personally." On reflection, Dante was glad of his guides. They took him through a tangled labyrinth of neglected passageways that would have confounded him had he attempted the trip alone. Lazial moaned every so often, but was quiescent, and Dante dared to hope. In half an hour they stood in the antechamber to an airlock leading outside. Segales looked at it thoughtfully. "I've never seen beyond this place." "You would need breathing apparatus to survive outside," said Dante. "The air is thin so far above your world's seas." Segales nodded. "So it is said. It is good to know for certain." Dante glanced at Lazial, who was slumped against the wall. "You must go." Segales's men gathered up their guns. The sentry at the door held up a hand. The rest fell instantly silent. "Bootsteps," he said. "Heavy. Adeptus Astartes." "Your brethren?" asked Segales. Dante shook his head. He unslung his bolt gun and moved alongside the sentry. The burning glow of helm lenses shone down the passageway. A bolt round slammed into the wall by the door and exploded. "The purge!" he shouted. He fired back. They were trapped. The civilians would be slaughtered. Segales's men were prizing cabinets from the walls and taking shelter behind them. Such barricades would be next to useless against mass reactives, and the militia would last seconds in combat with renegades. Dante's fury rose. So close, and here innocent men would lose their lives because of him. He emptied his bolt gun, filling the approach to the antechamber with streaking micro-missiles. They exploded loudly around his enemy. One gave out a metallic cry and fell dead. They retreated a step. "Are they falling back?" asked the sentry. More men joined them around the door. "Get back," said Dante. Too late. A rocket streaked down the corridor, exploding on the outside of the door. Dante was flung backwards. He slammed down and tumbled over, crushing a man under the weight of his armor. The men who had guarded the door with him were splashed or around the entrance. The smell of burned meat and blood flooded Dante's nostrils. He tried to seal his helm, but it was malfunctioning. His ears rang. He glanced round at scared faces, at men firing guns that could not hope to penetrate space marine armor. They had come there for him, to aid him and his brother. Figures moved down the corridor. Unreasoning fury overpowered Dante's reason. He surged to his feet, sword in hand, and ran howling at the purge. Bolt rounds blew all over his armor. The insistent peeping of warning runes became a clamor. He crashed into the traitors, sword hewing the first down. His bolt pistol ended the next. Knives jabbed at him, hammered by transhuman strength into the ceramite of his battleplate. Swords bounced from his pauldrons. Hands grappled with him, but Dante could not be stopped. He slew them, smashing their treacherous bodies down. His helmet was wrenched away, and his senses were flooded with blood, its color, its smell. His rage built until he was a killing machine. From there, it was a short step to a warm, wet world, rich with the scent of iron. The thing that was Dante receded, leaving an unguided weapon in its stead. His last foe fell, and he pounded back into the antechamber. "Lord Dante?" asked Segales. He took a step backwards, horrified by the bloodshot eyes and extended fangs of the Blood Angel. Howling incoherently, Dante attacked. The world became a confusion of screams and hot red blood pouring down his throat. There was a flash of gold. A mightier angel than he stood before him. With a single blow, the Sanguinor sent him reeling backwards. A second banished him deep into unconsciousness. "Dante, brother Dante, can you hear me?" A bright light flashed in his eyes. "He's awake, Captain. Is he cogent?" "Captain Avernus," said Dante. "Where am I?" It took a moment for Dante to place himself in the airlock adjoining the antechamber. His brothers stood around him, weapons ready. Both interior and exterior doors were open. A storm hawk hovered in the dirty sky outside. A humid decompression wind blew out from the hive. "The purge," said Dante. "You killed them all," said Avernus. "6 of them by yourself. Impressive. You display the warrior's virtues strongly." Dante got to his feet. "What of Lazial? He is unconscious. We shall heal his hurts. Then we will know soon enough if he has fallen too far." "Unconscious? I remember blood and screams," he said in sudden dismay. Dante looked down at his hands. They were drenched in blood. The salty iron of vitae coated his throat. Not Lazial. Him. The civilians. 2 of Avernus's command squad caught his arms. "Let me go! Let me see!" "Stop, brother!" commanded Avernus. Dante yanked free and stumbled back into the antechamber. The natives were dead, their throats torn out, skin pale from exsanguination. Dante looked around himself in horror. Segeles yet lived. He was propped, dazed against a wall, his stomach bleeding from a ragged wound. He stared ahead blankly. "The golden angel! The golden angel!" he said repeatedly. Avernus took Dante's arm and drew his hand into both of his own, gripping it tightly. "Dante, the thirst took you. You are not responsible. You would have been dead if it had not. You have saved hundreds of civilians like these. This is the price we pay." "I cannot," said Dante. He could not deny what he saw. He could not deny the flavour of vitae on his lips. Against his horror, his appetite rose again, and he turned away in shame. "What of this one?" asked veteran brother Strollo, one of Avernus's warriors. He pointed at Segeles. "No one can know of this," said Avernus. "Our shame must remain secret." Gently he shepherded Dante from the room into the airlock chamber. Dante was climbing into the Storm Raven when a single bolt shot banged from inside. He made to go back across the shifting assault ramp of the gunship, but Avernus pushed him inside. The ramp closed, and the Storm Raven bore Dante away. Appalled, Dante henceforth resolved he would take no blood from a living host ever again. Chapter 18. The Grace of Mercy, 998.M41, the Aegis Diamondo, Cryptus System. The Lord Commander's private librarium aboard the Blade of Vengeance held thousands of volumes. Many had been painstakingly copied by hand from data retrieval devices broken long ago, and as such were unique. Of these treasures, none were as precious as the Scrolls of Sanguinius, 99 rolls penned by the hand of the Primarch himself, recording his innermost thoughts. The originals were interred deep in the vaults of Marest in the librarium, protected from decay by powerful stasis fields. There were only 5 other copies. In his long life, Dante had handled the originals only 3 times. Dante sat in day robes of red and gold at his oversized desk. Though the copy exhibited little wear, Dante had read Sanguinius's words on countless occasions. One passage in particular he returned to more than any other. His fingers traced the words now, smooth velvet gloves protecting the vellum from the secretions of his skin. "I fear what I have seen," the Primarch wrote. "My visions plague me with darkness." So little of comfort can be gleaned from them. The consequences of our victory are dire indeed, as I have described in these writings, and yet there are some things I cannot bring myself to record, visions so dark that they fill my heart with despair. The dreams of my father are dead, that is certain. Long eons await of war and suffering that would break the heart of the Emperor to perceive. He never showed any sign that he saw the dark future advancing towards us. Does he know? I cannot credit that he does not. My gift of foresight, if gift it can truly be named, descends from his, and his is more potent than I can conceive. Time and again I have asked myself, did he always know, and did he foresee all that has come to pass? Or was he, like me, taken unawares? The brighter future I once saw has been burned to ashes, and a second,
rotten potentiality raised in its place. I curse you, Horus. I curse you to the end of days. I have written too often on these matters. I still cannot divine the answer. I shall instead write down my dream of last night. This brought some comfort to me when no comfort ought to be expected, and is thus worthy of record. Dante unrolled the scroll, exposing the next page. There shall come to pass days of great darkness, when mankind is diminished, and all the lights of the world shall be extinguished, and the final scraps of hope torn away. I dreamed I was upon a plain of black sand, studded with diamond stars. In the dream there was a great hunger that pervaded all time and space, a more terrible and consuming appetite than the thirst that dogs my sons. It rose from the east of the night, and swallowed the moons of Baal that coursed across the unfamiliar sky. Before Baal Secundus was consumed, a bright light flashed upon it and sped away, outpacing the shadows. The hunger spread rapidly, bloated by its meal of my home. Fortified by the blood of Baal, the formless hunger took shape, becoming a ravenous dragon that consumed the stars in great mouthfuls until the only light was the memory of their glory trapped in the diamonds on the sand. As the last star was eaten, the hellish octet of the traitors burned through the western sky, writ in fire on the starless void. Then this too went out, and I was alone in the dark. Shadows swirled and parted. The vision lost its disguise of metaphor, and I looked upon a scene that may be a true echo of the future. I saw my father, ruined, broken. I knew it was him, though his body was little more than a corpse, for I could feel his mind. His power was much reduced in potency, and I could feel no sense of consciousness there, merely raging, ungoverned power that threatened to obliterate my sleeping mind.